Today I'm going to share with you 3 highly disturbing stories, and in the end show you the picture famously associated with that story. Blanche Monnier was born in France to Louise Monnier and Charles Monnier on March 1, 1849. She had an older brother, Marcel, who was a year older. The Monnier family were part of a conservative political party in France, and they were very influential. Blanche Monnier enjoyed the life of a young French socialite. She was a very happy-go-lucky person and was loved by everyone for her radiant personality. Louise, Blanche's mother, was a beautiful woman born to a successful stockbroker and married her husband Charles when she was just 22. Although very beautiful, she was known for her poor personal hygiene and being very miserly. A maid who worked for her accounted that she only wore one filthy dress daily and would heavily restrict her children, constantly monitoring them. Blanche and her mother got along well during her childhood, but something changed as she was growing. They would constantly fight and they would clash repeatedly. Things were not looking good for the relationship. Their main scuffle would be on the topic of Blanche's marriage. She was 22 and, unlike her peers, was unmarried. She attracted many potential suitors for marriage but did not really get along with them and couldn't foresee a future with them. However much her mom forced her, she wouldn't budge. But when she was 27, things changed. She fell in love with an older lawyer who was poor and did not have any status. When she went to get her parents' approval, they refused. Her mother was especially furious and told her that she could not marry that penniless lawyer. She explained that they would become a laughingstock in front of their peers and wouldn't be respected. Her mom insisted that she get someone more appropriate. But deeply in love, Blanche did not listen. She persisted in hopes to get her mother's approval, but it never worked. Angered by her daughter's defiance, Louise was fed up, and she locked up Blanche in a small, pitch-black, windowless room in the attic. She was given leftover food and a straw mat to sleep on. Her mother said if she gave up on that broke lawyer, she would be free again, but she refused. She would not give up her lover. While she was locked up, the rest of the family just pretended to mourn her disappearance. Unfortunately, in 1885, her suitor died while she was still imprisoned in the attic. As for her father, he had passed away 6 years after Blanche was imprisoned. The extent of his involvement is unknown, but he definitely played a part in it. After 25 years of being locked up, an anonymous letter went to the Paris Attorney General. The letter read, "Monsieur Attorney General, I have the honor to inform you of an exceptionally serious occurrence. I speak of a spinster who is locked up in Madame Monnier's house, half-starved, and living on a putrid litter for the past 25 years, in a word, in her own filth." After reading the mail, the police were sent to the residence, and they made the chilling discovery of Blanche's imprisonment. The police described how Blanche looked at that time, and it was horrifying. They said she was confined to the bed completely naked, covered in food remains, bugs, and her own excrement and vomit. The policeman who found her couldn't stand to be in the room for long, as the air was stale and filled with the odor of putrid food and human waste. Upon Blanche's discovery and rescue, the case became international news. The press labeled her the living skeleton of Poitiers. It was a media sensation. Both Louise and Marcel were arrested. However, Louise died a mere 15 days after her discovery. After her death, all attention switched to her son, Marcel, who bore the brunt of the outrage felt by the public. During his trial, Marcel's defense lawyer argued that there had been no violence levied against the victim. Monsieur Marcel Monnier was found guilty of the charge against him and was sentenced to 15 months in prison. Immediately after the sentence was read out in court, Marcel and his lawyer appealed the verdict. They argued that Marcel was not responsible for the crime since he was not the legal owner and guardian of the Monnier home. The appeal was successful, and Marcel walked free in November 1901, mere weeks after the end of his trial. As for Blanche Monnier herself, she lived the rest of her life in a psychiatric hospital. This is the state in which the police found Blanche in the attic. The Heaven's Gate cult was founded by Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite in 1974, known within the movement as Ty and Do, respectively. Born in Texas in 1931, Marshall Applewhite led a seemingly ordinary life for the most part. Renowned for his musical talents, he once aspired to be an actor. When this endeavor proved unsuccessful, he turned his focus to careers in music within university settings, which initially showed promise. However, in 1970, he purportedly faced termination from his position as a music professor at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. The reason cited was allegedly his involvement in a romantic relationship with one of his male students. Despite being already divorced from his wife at that time, the loss of his job proved to be a significant challenge for Applewhite, potentially leading to a period of emotional struggle, and he may have experienced a nervous breakdown. Bonnie Nettles was a nurse with a profound fascination for the Bible and a set of somewhat esoteric spiritual convictions. They both first met in 1972 when Marshall went to a hospital with heart trouble, and after that they went on a spiritual journey. They claimed they were the two witnesses of the apocalypse mentioned in the Book of Revelations. Heaven's Gate combined elements of Christianity, science fiction, and New Age philosophy. They believed in the existence of extraterrestrial life and thought that Earth was about to be recycled, and the only way to survive was to leave their human bodies and ascend to an extraterrestrial spacecraft. They claimed they could help their followers transform into higher extraterrestrial beings if they rejected their human nature, and they could go to heaven. They also said they can save their followers from Lucifer. After they had formed their core values, they started recruiting members. They made posters to attract their followers. They promoted conspiracy theories and science fiction, and said they will save everyone who follows them. The posters claimed they were above humans and will return to their UFO within a few months. Using these tactics, they were able to attract a few hundred followers in the mid-70s. To join the cult, one had to renounce all human possessions and abandon their family. Then only they could be elevated to a new world and a better life known as TELAH, the evolutionary level above human. Their followers traveled with them everywhere, but slowly things were becoming difficult. The followers began to face difficulty giving up human relationships and socializing, moreover, the other strict rules they had to adhere to. Things became worse. Nettles died from cancer in 1985. The followers thought, why did Nettles die before the TELAH beings came to pick the followers up? Marshall was able to remedy the situation by saying that the body was merely a container or vehicle for the soul, and that their consciousness would be transferred to new, next-level bodies upon death. This again convinced his followers to listen to him. On March 23, 1997, everything changed. Marshall told his followers that they would be able to board an extraterrestrial spacecraft following the Hale-Bopp comet, which was passing close to Earth at that time. Listening to him, 39 members consumed a mixture of barbiturates and applesauce and washed it down with vodka. Group by group, bags were tied over their heads to ensure asphyxiation. Applewhite himself was the 37th to die. Upon receiving an anonymous tip on March 26th, deputies of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department discovered 39 bodies meticulously arranged in bunk beds and other designated resting areas. The individuals wore identical black tracksuits and Nike sneakers, with purple shrouds enveloping them, wearing matching armbands with the phrase Heaven's Gateway Team. Eerily, just before the event, the group's website was updated with the message, Hale-Bopp brings closure to Heaven's Gate. Our 22 years of classroom here on planet Earth is finally coming to conclusion. Graduation from the human evolutionary level. We are happily prepared to leave this world and go with T's crew. The informant behind the anonymous tip was subsequently unveiled as a former member who had departed the group a mere few weeks prior. This individual had received a disconcerting package containing videotaped farewells from the group, along with a map leading to the mansion. The chief investigator for the medical examiner's office, Calvin Vine, said, I walked in, and of course, the obvious odor of decomposed bodies actually hit you as soon as you entered the residence, he remembers. But there was no mess. There was nothing out of place. There was no trash in the trash cans. Everything was just immaculate. It was pretty surreal when you walk in and see a body dressed in black, covered with a purple shroud over the head. The family members of the deceased were heartbroken and were left to cope with their losses. Here is what the police officers saw as they entered the building. If you have enjoyed the video so far, please consider subscribing. It would help the channel a lot. Mary Hinkle Reeser, formerly known as Mary Hinkle Hardy, was born on 8th of March 1884 in Pennsylvania, to William H. Hardy and Catherine H. Hardy. She had two siblings, Nellie Hardy Bender and Sarah Hardy Graver. She would later get married to Richard Reeser and have a son named Richard Reeser Jr., but unfortunately, due to the death of her husband, she had to take care of her son alone. Reeser was described as a pleasant, overweight woman who suffered from arthritis and had been prescribed medication for her condition. After her son grew up and had a family of his own, she decided to move Florida to move with him and her grandchildren. Although she was really homesick and missed Pennsylvania, she really wanted to be around her family. On July 1st, 1951, it was a hot day in Florida. Mary was feeling particularly worse that day. She had lost her appetite completely because she was feeling even more homesick. While leaving for work, Richard kissed his mother and left. After he left, Mary thought she would feel better if she had a good rest. Mary opted to change into her nightgown and took 2 sleeping pills, the sole substances in her system before sleeping. She then smoked a cigarette before laying on the sofa. The next day, when Mary's landlord, Pansy Carpenter, came to deliver a telegram, she tried to turn the doorknob, but it was too hot and there was an awful smell coming from the house. Pansy then immediately called the fire station and the police. When the firefighters broke the door, they only saw a pile of black ash and some embers. There was no sign of Mary. When the police searched the pile of ash, they found remnants of her sofa, a part of her left leg and her skull, shrunken far beyond its normal size. The police quickly checked for any signs of fighting or someone breaking in, thinking it might be a murder. But they didn't find anything like that. The fire didn't happen by mistake because the walls were all relatively clean and the electric switches were fine. Except for the couch, Mary's apartment looked tidy and normal. The police also noticed that, strangely, the room's temperature was not high enough to cause complete cremation, yet Reeser's remains were almost entirely consumed. When the case was found out by the public, they all had their own theories, from napalm to phosphorus to thermite bombs, and sent their wild theories to St. Petersburg Police Chief J.R. Reichart. People also started claiming this is spontaneous combustion, and the chemical reactions in her body caused the flames. Some other claims were someone had murdered Reeser, cremated her off-site, and returned her remains to the apartment to be found. 1 month after Reeser passed away, Police Chief J.R. Reichart from St. Petersburg made a statement, calling the mystery the most unusual case I've seen during my almost 25 years of police work. Feeling perplexed, he decided to write a letter to the FBI, addressing it to Mr. Hoover, and mentioned, "Dear Mr. Hoover, this fire is too puzzling for the small-town force to handle." Now the FBI got involved in the case and they did a thorough investigation. FBI agents didn't find any signs that lightning had hit Mary Reeser or her building. All the fuses in her apartment were still okay. The investigators couldn't find any substances that might have caused the fire. Normal things that can make fires, like alcohol or gasoline, would likely be used up in this kind of fire, and we didn't find any trace of them afterward, the investigators said. Even after everything, they weren't able to get an answer, so they theorized that it's probable that the sleeping pills strongly affected Mary, causing her to fall asleep in her chair, and the cigarette she was smoking fell on her nightgown, which was made of rayon acetate, a highly flammable material. Since she was unconscious, she didn't realize she had caught on fire, and the fat in her body acted as fuel to it. But a lot of forensic experts disagreed with this theory. They said that the cremation of the body, which would have required several thousand degrees over the course of several hours, and also her skull would have exploded instead of shrinking. It's been more than 70 years since Mary Reeser died in a mysterious way, and even today, nobody really knows for sure what happened to her. The idea that she might have died from spontaneous combustion has not been proven or disproven. After the FBI investigation, her ashes were buried next to her husband's in Pennsylvania. Here is what the police officers saw as they entered the building.